Hi, welcome to Less Lessy Reviews. Today on Less Lessy Reviews, the self-titled album by Phedre. So Phedre are a Toronto-based pop act, and I would sort of say that they fall under the category of pop, new wave, with sort of like the synth pop thrown in. They definitely have that very like mid-80s feel to them. So Phedre's self-titled album sounds really forced to me, and what I mean by that is I think it was just released too soon. Like this album it feels like to me like I'm at a wedding and it was like this arranged wedding in space on like Mars or something like that, going along with that mid-80s very science fiction synth pop sound. But just the fact that this album just feels really sort of forced and uncomfortable, as if two people were supposed to come together and they didn't really know each other or didn't really love each other yet. That's what this album really speaks to me. So Phedre's self-titled album really reminds me of the artist Time and their really like 80s Italo disco sound, but it also reminds me of another band by the name of Solid Space and David Bowie. But although this album has really crisp production value and it sounds just really well produced in general, it doesn't necessarily have the soul that all of those albums and artists did. It just doesn't have the energy, the originality, and the freshness that those artists did. So I'm not really sure if I think I can compare these to any one of those things, but a mixture of all three really, I think that's what it really sounds like to me. So there's a couple things that are really setting this album back, and the main thing I think is it just sounds really incomplete. One of the things that comes up for me is that they have these really weird disjointed intermediary tracks in between. And I think what they're trying to do, or what it sounds like to me, is that they're trying to just increase the length of the album. And that's never a good thing if you're throwing in things like these to increase the length of the album. And that's another thing, is the album is really short. You know, it's really short. Even if you do count in these like intermediate, like mini tracks, it's still like a really short album. So one of the things is I think this album could really use is some rap on it. And they tried a little bit of it on the song Cold Sunday, but they could really utilize that more to get a really full sounding. And it doesn't necessarily have to, you know, conflict with the overall style of the album being a sort of a synth pop album. But if they threw a little bit of that in, I think it would really boost the overall flavor and the overall interest of the album. It would have been really cool. Like I said, they did sort of play with that, but they needed to do more with that, more emphasis on that sort of stylistic choice. The last thing that this album really sort of did is it used a lot of like spacey sounding sound effects that I don't think that really worked on this album. Earlier when I said that it had this theme that was like, you know, like two people getting forced marriage in space, that's what the space of sound effects, that's where that comes in, is it just doesn't really add to the over thematical elements of the album, when for the most part the lyrics on the album are just talking about love and people and that sort of thing. So using these very like 80s science fiction themed sound effects just seemed really crass and just like not needed at all on this album. One of the really nice things about this album is that the bass drum, the kick drum in this, it was done really effectively. And the best songs on the album, namely Dreams, Cold Sunday, and the song called In Decay, those are all songs that really benefited from a really strong kick drum, a really strong drum beat. And I think for synth pop in general, that it is really reliant on that sound. And I think that the best songs in that album are the ones that really utilize that. So if they were to do something like that more throughout the rest of the album, they would have really improved the overall sound of the album, just with a little bit more of a dancey vibe to it, because that's what this album sort of gives out, but doesn't quite finish. So overall, I think this album had a lot of potential, but it didn't quite meet it. Like there was a couple songs, like I said, really enjoyed Cold Sunday, really enjoyed In Decay, and really enjoyed Dreams. But for the most part, just the overall theme and the overall interest of this album wasn't really there for me. And I think that it could have been improved, but I think that this band definitely will improve it on their next albums. Just this release they might have been trying a couple things that didn't necessarily work. Overall, I think this album is probably about a 5.5 out of 10, sort of a middle of the road mark for me. And, like, comment, subscribe, and there'll be something up soon.